Welcome to the Plain Faith Podcast, Episode 4.
I thought, I will never do that because you got to wear khaki pants and tilly hats and kind of fit the stereotype, and you might get eaten by cannibals.
The Plain Faith Podcast is a podcast about missionary aviation and the stories of missionary aviators who have taken seriously Jesus' command to go and make disciples of all nations and are using airplanes to be His witnesses at the ends of the earth. Thank you for joining us for this episode. Your host for today's show will be Jimmy Tidmore, who, in addition to hosting this podcast, is a pastor and a pilot residing with his family in what is known as the Rocket City, Huntsville, Alabama. He is very interested in promoting missionary aviation and helping prospective missionary pilots reach the mission field. And now, with these introductions out of the way, let's get started on another great episode of the Plain Faith Podcast.
Welcome to the Plain Faith Podcast. My name is Jimmy Tidmore, and in today's episode, we will be hearing from Marcel Boers, an aircraft maintenance engineer who serves in Angola with his wife and his young son. I am excited to hear his story today, and I hope you are as well. Well, Marcel, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Plain Faith Podcast. I'm very excited to hear your story and have you share about your adventures there in Angola and the adventure of how you arrived there in the first place, including how you developed a passion for aviation and how your training to become an aircraft maintenance engineer unfolded. So thank you again for being with us today on the podcast. We look forward to hearing from you.
No problem. My pleasure.
All right. Well, why don't we just begin by having you tell us a little bit about yourself? For example, where are you from? Where did you grow up, and about your family and so forth?
Yeah, my name's Marcel, and I grew up in southern Ontario, Canada, on a little hobby farm. Was homeschooled till I was in grade 8, so that hobby farm was a big part of my childhood, where we spent a lot of our time outdoors with, we had horses and cows for a bit, and chickens, ducks, and rabbits. I went to a Christian high school, and as a kid developed a passion for aviation, living about a 5-minute drive from an international airport and always seeing airplanes flying over. And it was a small enough airport as well where they would host an annual air show where I think Blue Angels came a couple times, and Thunderbirds and the Canadian Snowbirds. So I think my passion for aviation definitely came out of that air show, though.
And so would you say that your passion for aviation then preceded your call to missions?
Absolutely, yeah. When I was young, I remember going to a missions conference in Toronto with my parents and seeing an MAF booth. At that time, this was pre-internet, so I grabbed as many calendars and pamphlets and brochures as I could so I could cut out the pictures of the airplanes and put them on my wall in my bedroom. So I'd always heard of Mission Aviation Fellowship or Mission Aviation, but it was always something that I thought, I will never do that because you got to wear khaki pants and tilly hats and kind of fit the stereotype, and you might get eaten by cannibals. And I'm not really sure where those ideas came from, but that's what I had, and that's what, as a kid, I said, I will never do that.
So you were at this missions conference and you come across this Mission Aviation Fellowship booth, and they have all these handouts and so forth, and you take them home, but it's not really about the mission stuff as much as it is you just want to hang airplanes up on your wall.
Pretty much, yeah. I grew up in a Christian home and identified myself as a Christian, have all my life, but at that time, missions was definitely off the radar.
Very good. So you're passionate about aviation as a kid. You live near an airport, see airplanes taking off and landing, and then later on comes your call to missions. Why don't you tell us about how that took place? How did you transition from being someone who's a Christian, being someone who's passionate about aviation, to saying, hey, I would like to be a part of missionary aviation at some faraway part of the world? Yeah,
it's an interesting story personally to look back on and see where God's brought me. I think it definitely started with that missions conference and finding out what MAF was, because throughout my life up until joining MAF, it was something that I felt a little bit like Jonah, where it's like, God's calling me here, but I kind of want to do what I want over in this area. So that developed a lot by numerous times where MAF would just keep popping up in random places. And it wasn't like it was mission aviation that kept popping up. It was always MAF where, yeah, I'd end up seeing them at another conference somewhere. And then I remember my dad, he came to visit me while I was in college, and he said, "Oh, check out this DVD I got. It's of this organization where they land on grass and dirt airstrips all around the world." And I thought, "Oh, it's definitely going to be MAF." And sure enough, it was. And while I was in college doing tech school for aircraft maintenance, my focus at that time was just I wanted to get a decent job, do my 40 hours a week, and be home every night with my family. That's kind of where pilot got ruled out of it, and I enjoy working with my hands as well. So maintenance kind of seemed like the thing that was suitable for me. And when I met who is now my wife, one of the first things she told me was that if this relationship's going to work out, then we're going to travel. And initially I just thought, well, like to the Caribbean, I like to travel. You'd go to Jamaica or Mexico for a week and have a holiday. And she kind of shook her head like, no. Like, we're going to go move somewhere for a year or maybe 2 years. And so I thought, well, I guess I really liked her, so I thought, sure, we'll see how this goes. And shortly after I guess a year after we started dating, part of the major steps that led me to reconsidering mission aviation was Urbana Conference in St. Louis. That was 2009 we went. And I pretty much went because my wife told me she was going, and I saw it as a good opportunity to spend a week with her. We were doing long distance dating for the first couple of years. But it was at this conference where there's a huge room where they have hundreds of different organizations got their displays set up. And I saw MAF there, and I did a hard left and walked away from it because I knew if my girlfriend at the time saw it, then she'd tell me to go talk to them. And sure enough, I think it was like the next day we were walking through that room again, and she noticed it and told me to go talk to the people over there because there's airplanes over there. So sort of to appease her, I did that, thinking I knew all about what MAF was about. Talking with a guy, I learned that mission aviators, they don't just live in the jungle and wear tilly hats and khaki pants. They actually live in real houses and eat real food and have TV and just all these things that I thought were just not at all what my expectations were. And I think that's where the idea first started in my head that maybe this is something we could do. And it kind of fell in line with what my wife was saying, where we're going to travel, where over the next couple of years we kept kind of pushing each other a little bit further that, maybe we're going to move to a crazier country than we thought. Maybe we're going to go for longer than we thought. And at the end of that, the only thing left was missions. I had another friend who worked halfway around the world for a year, and it was something I thought I might do. And in talking with him, he was saying how he was making less money, getting a great experience, but coming home not any further ahead. And I thought, well, if we're going to do this, I want to make sure this is purposeful and meaningful. And I didn't see anything greater than doing missions work. And I think the other stereotype I had with missions was that you had to be a pastor or an evangelist. And finding out through MAF that, like I have these skills where I can fix airplanes and I can use that to the kingdom of God, then I felt strongly that was something I needed to do.
So to summarize, you would say that the first seed was planted for missions at that missions conference that you went to with your parents as a child, where you first saw this MAF booth, and then MAF kept popping up throughout your life along the way, and it was always sort of MAF. You meet a young lady who would become your wife. She tells you that she wants to travel. You do this conference, to this Urbana conference together. MAF's there again, and you try to run from it a little bit, but you eventually make your way to that booth and have a conversation and learn maybe that your stereotypes about missionaries weren't completely true, and that you could use the skills that you had in life as an aircraft maintenance engineer to the glory of God. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Then you thought about, well, if we're going to go overseas, we might as well go for a reason that matters.
Right. Yeah, and I think back to that previous question regarding MAF popping up is absolutely right, and it always seemed to happen at the most random moments. So when we did decide that missions was something we were going to do, we had checked out a few other organizations, which are all good, but because it was always MAF that kept coming back to me, that was one of the main reasons why we eventually went with them.
I do want to come back to the whole process with you starting to talk with MAF very seriously and how that interview process went and the application process went. I want to come back to that later, but before we get there, let me hit on a couple of other things.
Sure.
First of all, having had you describe this process of realizing, hey, I'm called to missions and we're going to go do missions work without having a whole lot of clarity yet, I wonder if you could give some advice to our listeners, maybe someone out there who is right now wrestling with a call to missions. I was wondering if there's any way you could help them think through that process.
I think two things in hindsight, looking back now. One is don't rush learning everything you can about the culture if you feel called to a specific culture. And that includes language as well. It makes a transition so much easier if you're prepared for what you're going into. Language is such a difficult barrier to get over unless you're truly gifted at learning another language, which I'm definitely not, but it's coming along here. And I think another more broad thing, if you're considering missions, is that whatever's holding you back from getting involved, know that God is bigger than that. If it's finances or distance or even language, God is a whole lot bigger than that. And if He's calling you to a specific area, or maybe not a specific area, just a call into missions, He won't let you down. There's definitely going to be bumps and trials along the way, but if it's something that is furthering His kingdom, you can have faith that He will carry you through it.
All right, very good. That has to be encouraging to someone out there who may be wrestling with, is God leading me in this direction, and can I really persevere and do this? Let's transition now to talk about your aircraft maintenance engineer training. Where did you do that training? What did it entail? How long did it take, and so forth?
Yeah, in Canada, Transport Canada is the governing authority. So there's various tech schools you can go to. Some of them, I guess most of them are Transport Canada approved. So when you do your 2-year tech school, that does give you credit towards your apprenticeship. I went to Canadore College in North Bay, Ontario. It's about a 3-hour drive north of Toronto. Fantastic facility. I had a great time there. Learned it is one of the top schools in my opinion, and I'm probably a little biased, but other people say the same thing too. So little plug for Canadore. But yeah, I did 2 years there. That gave me my 19 months towards a 40, what is it now? I think it's a 48-month apprenticeship, 4 years. So graduated from that. I then was working part-time at a flight school doing maintenance. And in Canada as well, they divide their transport and general aviation into 2 categories, into 2 licenses. And the flight school gave me credit towards my M1, which would be general aviation. And a few months after graduating, then I started working for a regional airline, part of Air Canada, which was Air Canada Jazz at the time, which was for an M2 license, transport category. So I finished my license a few years after graduating. In total, worked there for 5 years before the base I was working at closed down. At that time was when we were heading into a MAF direction, which transport category license doesn't do you much good. So then I was kind of back into the general aviation world, working for another farmer who had a paint shop in his backyard with a runway in his cornfield. And that was a great experience because I was able to just volunteer my time there for the purpose of getting my license for general aviation as well.
The work you were doing was on larger airplanes, and you needed some experience with smaller single engine.
That's right.
type of airplanes that you are right now maintaining on the mission field. Is that
Right,
correct?
right.
Now, I know that you are also a private pilot.
Yep.
So tell us about that. When and why did you get your pilot's license?
Yeah, that was 2007. I just finished tech school and had I think a 2 or 3 month window before my summer job was starting. And talking with my dad, he told me that, hey, there happens to be still some money left in the education fund, and all my siblings had gone through their post-secondary education, and found out that I was able to apply that to doing some ground school. So I actually did the ground school just as I was finishing tech school, and then moved back home, and pretty much on a Monday morning headed to the nearby airport, walked in to the office, which was actually the same place I'd done some part-time work before, and told them I want to get my license and I've got 2 months to do it. And they said, well, yeah, if you got the time, then I think we can do 2 to 3 lessons a day. So went at it hard and got just to getting my flight test booked before I had to move away again for a summer job. And that's been quite a beneficial experience. There's been times where I've definitely thought, I think I was considering the potential of a pilot mechanic career. Definitely enjoyed the experience, love flying, but in the end felt that maintenance I wouldn't say that I liked it more, but just felt more called to the maintenance world.
We've talked about your passion for aviation. We've talked about your training to become a maintenance engineer. Let's transition now to talk about the mission field in general. And I would like to begin by hearing about Mission Aviation Fellowship, how that process of getting from, hey, I want to work with you, to being on the mission field with them took place. I'd just like to hear about that process.
Right. Well, MAF is, they're in about 30 different countries around the world and can boast the largest fleet of private aircraft. I think there's like 130 airplanes. I could be wrong on that number. But as far as MAF Angola is concerned, we have 2 Cessna 182s that are SMA diesel engines. So we can put Jet A in those things, which is the only fuel we have access to here in Angola. And we also have a Cessna Caravan, which is our workhorse. As far as getting involved with MAF in the first place, it was kind of an interesting road when I first got into the workforce, because working for an airline with great flight benefits, I thought I had it all. Was able to fly anywhere in the world for less than $110 round trip, and that was a great perk.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes I wish I took more advantage of that, but it definitely helped with the long distance relationship at that time, as one might understand. So, but when I did start with them, I thought it was kind of a 5-year plan I had, that I'd see where it went, and seeing where some of the senior guys I was working with were at, they all just seemed miserable. And I thought, if I'm here for 20 years or more, am I going to turn out like them? So I thought, well, I'll give this 5 years, and if I feel God's calling me elsewhere, then I'll see where that goes. And in year number 4, we got notice at the base that I was working at that they were going to be closing it down and wanted everyone to transition halfway across the country. And that wasn't really something I was interested in. And the closing date they gave would be 2 months after my 5th year with the company. So definitely took that as a sign from God saying, you were thinking 5 years. And so if you're not going to move on from this company, then I'm going to make sure you do. And that timing as well was, I think, when we had just gotten married and were considering that MAF was the direction we were heading. So as news of that comes out, when you're working on a hangar floor with 150 other mechanics, everyone's asking, oh, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And to have just come to that conclusion that, well, I think we're going to go into missions, definitely took that stress off of, oh my goodness, I'm losing my job here, and kind of going, well, I think the plan is going to speed up here now because we have to.
So what you're saying is you got this letter from the company that you were working with says, hey, basically in another year, you can either move across the country or not have a job. And you took that as a sign from God that, hey, now's the time to go with MAF and do this thing that my wife and I have been thinking about doing.
Right, yeah. And it was a completely peaceful, mentally decision in our minds that everything was just kind of fitting together really well through that whole transition, that this just seemed clearly where we were supposed to be going.
So what was the process like then? So you contact MAF and how does it go from there? How does that process unfold?
It's quite an extensive process. They don't just take anyone off the street, so there's definitely some criteria to meet, and I think there was 4 different psychological evaluations we had to go through. And one example of one of them that always sticks out in my mind is in one evaluation, it was asking you to rank the National Postal Service out of 10. And I to this day have no idea what that has to do with your psyche or your way of thinking, but I'm not a psychologist, so I can't answer on that. But there's definitely lots of interviews to go through, just for your standard of whether you're prepared to move overseas, to what is your abilities technically. And included in that was a week where I had to go to Nampa, Idaho, to the MAF US base and do a 1-week technical evaluation, which was a very good experience. And then I believe the tech eval was the last step before we went into a 1-week orientation where we were welcomed in as members of MAF.
And then after that, you're raising support and so forth, and you get to a certain support level before you can head to the field. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. Basically, out of that orientation week was hit the ground running to do ministry partnership, support raising. And that was one area I don't think many people really enjoy doing. And for us, we weren't really excited for the idea of going around and asking people for money. But getting through that and looking back, we definitely learned a whole lot, that it's more than just going around and asking people for money. You're inviting people into your ministry, and on top of that, it's not like you're convincing people that they need to give. A lot of people have the conviction already to give to a worthy organization, and it's just you're basically making better friends than you already are with your friends, and making new friends and people that have a common interest with you. It just so happens that we have the capacity to move overseas, and not everyone does. So it was great to see people joining us in our ministry financially and in prayer, and it's so encouraging when you host a dessert night or something and you see thousands of dollars coming in. And I think with that as well was just more encouragement and confirmation for us that this is what we were supposed to do. If it wasn't, then the support would not come.
I had always heard when I was wrestling with a call to pastoral ministry that there's the call from God that you begin to sense. There's the desire that you have within yourself to do it as well.
Yeah.
But there's also confirmation by the church. And if the confirmation by the church is not there, then you should sincerely question the calling. So yes, I could see how that would be very encouraging to you to receive that support, and not just the financial support, but the, hey, yes, we believe this is what you should go do.
Right.
So yeah, I can understand that. Let's rewind a bit. Tell me about your wife, and you have a young son. I would like to hear about them, and also I'd like to hear about how your wife played a role in you feeling called to missions, and how she was feeling called at the same time. And I believe she was sort of the impetus towards Africa. If you could just elaborate on those things.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, my wife, Kelly, we've been married just over 5 years now, and we have a 2-year-old son, Ethan, and another baby on the way, due November. So we're pretty excited about that.
Okay, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Part of the reason we're excited is that I think will allow us to go home. So we're looking forward to that as well. But she first had her first Africa experience in university. She did a 1 semester exchange to South Africa, and she says that's where she caught the travel bug. And I would probably disagree. I think she had that already, but she definitely caught the Africa bug from that. She came back and was intent on going back there. And maybe that's why our dating relationship started so well, because she saw I had flight benefits and wanted to go somewhere far. And I'll let her argue her point maybe another time, whether that's true or not. But yeah, she came back from that totally on fire for God. She got involved with a church there, and I think was a crucial point in her walk with God and salvation story. So it was kind of always on the back burner that one day we would go to Africa, whether that was just for, well, I think primarily just for a visit to see people that she formed relationships with there. And well, to this day, we haven't been back there yet, but we have moved to Africa now. As far as her encouragement into missions with that, yeah, like I was saying earlier, where she came from that experience and then went into, we went to the Urbana conference, and from there it was kind of each of us taking one step further, saying maybe missions is something that is on our plate.
Okay, so that Urbana conference you were at together, and you would say that played a pivotal role for both of you, agreeing that you were going to do, and this was before you were married, right?
Yeah, that was, we had been dating for, I think, just over a year at that point. That was 2009. We got married in 2012.
All right, but that was a key component in both of your calls to the mission field.
Yeah, I would say so for sure. It's interesting though, because it seems like a lot of people, whether it's how they got saved or how they got involved with missions, will recount to one specific moment and say, that's when I was called, or that's when I heard God's voice. And I don't think for either of us, we have that story. For both of us, it was lots of little things that just kept kind of pushing us forward. And for me, it started at Urbana, and it was a good 5 years of God slowly saying, this is where you are supposed to be.
Okay, so it was not a Saul on the road to Damascus sort of thing. It was a long process that this piece comes into place, this piece comes into place, this event happens, you run into the MAF folks again, that sort of thing, and then it becomes clear, hey, God really does want us to go do this.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so your wife was really interested in Africa, but when you come on board with MAF, that doesn't necessarily mean you get to choose where you want to go, right?
No, and they have an open ear that if you feel called to a specific country, then they can work with that. We joined MAF and we're saying we have no call to any country. We want to go somewhere where we can be put to use. So throughout our first 10, 11 months of support raising, we couldn't tell people where we were going because we didn't know. So we would just say that we're moving to an airport somewhere. And we had a good idea that it was likely Angola, because that is the program here is the one that MAF Canada runs. So if it wasn't Angola, then it could have been anywhere from Papua New Guinea to Mongolia.
Okay, but that was primarily because you said, send us where you need us.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So just for the sake of any of our listeners who may be thinking about heading to the mission field, maybe talking with MAF, did I hear you say that you could say, I would prefer this country, I feel called to this particular part of the world?
Yeah, if you have that, then they'll definitely listen to that. I think if we told them right from the start that if they were saying possibly Angola, and we said we definitely want to go to Angola, then as long as there's an opening there, which there definitely was, then that worked out well. But part of the reason for delaying it as well is I guess there's been previous instances where they tell a couple, yeah, you're going to go to the Congo, And if it takes a year of support raising, well, a lot can happen in a year. And maybe by the time the support is raised, then, well, Congo doesn't need a pilot or a mechanic anymore. We actually really need one in Papua New Guinea, which, taking that back to some of your supporters who maybe have a heart for Congo, might go, well, I gave you that money for this, and now it's not going there anymore. So there's definitely a reason for the delay in it.
Cut to the end of it, you're now in Angola. Tell us a little bit about what it's like and how it is different from your home, what you're used to in Canada, what your wife's used to in Canada, and about the things that have been difficult to adjust to there.
Right. Language definitely is the one for me. Fortunately, my wife is one of those people who can learn a language fairly quickly, possibly because she knew French pretty well before coming here. And Angola is a Portuguese-speaking country. So all things considered, I think I'm glad that I didn't have to learn a whole new alphabet, or that it actually is a written language. So there is some positives to it. The fact that it's a Latin-based language is good, coming from English. But yeah, Angola, it's kind of a different country in that when we found out we were coming here, it's very difficult to find any sort of news or history on it, because Angola just doesn't really make the news all that often. And one of the big things that's shaped the culture here today is that there was a civil war that started here in 1975, I think it was, when the Portuguese pulled out and basically told the other powers that were here, saying the country's yours, take it. And those groups were 4 other parties, and basically all fought until 2002 for who would be the ones in charge. And so there is an election this year where the president has stated that he is going to step down, and he's been in power since 1975. So
oh, wow.
It'll be interesting to see how things change from one person to the other, assuming that the same party does stay in power. Other than that, that's kind of the political background on it. And I think that also shapes why MAF is here. MAF has been here since 1989, and over the years has done a variety of different flying. During the war years, it was mostly for the World Food Program, for UN. They would fly anything from food to, they have had regular elections here. And sometimes those flights would involve the bag of votes that needed to go from one county to the next for counting. And since the end of the war, things have, I think, greatly improved here. We've only been here a year and a half, so it's hard to say for sure what some of the changes have been. But hearing stories of what it was like during the war, it was a different place. Today, we're in the city of Lubango, and there's 2 Western-style grocery stores. There's a little mall. There's a theater with 5 different theater rooms in it, and play new release movies that you would see anywhere else in the world. So those are things that we did not really expect, but also makes it a whole lot easier to live here when those days come up where you can't do it. You need a little break. And we live on a compound here where we really can't complain. We have great neighbors. A lot of our work is associated with the Christian hospital here, CML, and that's affiliated with Samaritan's Purse. USAID contributed a lot towards it. And so our neighbors are a lot of the doctors that work at that hospital. And it's amazing to see how several different missions organizations all work together, where there's rural clinics and doctors that work out in the bush who call us. We need to transfer a patient from the bush to the hospital here. And primarily our flights are with the Fistula Foundation, which, if you don't know anything about that, it's basically for women, young women typically, who had trouble giving birth and usually miscarried, and it lasted a couple days where blood circulation things got cut off, where they can no longer control how they pee or poop. And through that, they're outcast from their communities. So where MAF plays a role in that is we pick up these patients. It's funded by the Fistula Foundation based in the States. And we take them to the hospital. They have anywhere from one surgery to multiple surgeries over the course of a year. And when they go home, some of them are even able to have babies again and are actually welcomed into their community. And that's, as I say, the fulfilling side of work is when you see those patients go back with smiles on their faces, that they're actually welcomed back into their family. Other parts of our work here, we fly pastors around for various church conferences throughout the country. There's a number of different denominations in Angola. And I think it's recognized as like 80% as a Christian country. But where the work of the church really needs help, from what I've seen, is just in developing a good theology here. It's a mile wide and an inch deep. And there's very little resource for many of the churches throughout the country. So to be able to come alongside the church and help out with that has been good and something we value, because it's working directly with the Angolan pastors. It's not just white people coming to save Angola. With that mindset, you're not going to get anywhere.
So it sounds like MAF Angola is doing some really important work there, and I appreciate you sharing those sorts of things with us. I'd like to hear about the sort of work that you do on a daily basis. You mentioned that you had 2 Cessna 182s. Tell us about the fleet of aircraft that you're responsible for maintaining and the sorts of things that you have to do to keep them in the air so these pastors can be transported and these individuals who are needing medical care can receive the care they need.
Right. Well, thankfully, we have a caravan as well, which, knock on wood, never breaks down and is a tremendous asset to have here. Having, I think we can put up to 12 seats in it, whereas the 182 is a 1 pilot, 3 passengers, which last year we were doing a big refurbishment project on our caravan, and we're without it for 5 to 6 months. And then one of our 182s went down, and by the time decisions are made and parts are ordered, 3 to 4 months can go by where we only had 1 airplane and 2 pilots. So that was a very hectic season. It's a whole lot nicer to have 3 airplanes here, and we actually only have 1 pilot now due to our 1 pilot having some visa issues and having to go home for some time. But yeah, as far as the daily work on the airplanes or in the maintenance department in general, I've got 1 Angolan guy that I work with, and I report to my boss, Tim, who's based in Calgary, Alberta. And so that kind of sums up our maintenance department, which is small and works for 3 airplanes. But we're typically doing anything from the regular inspections on the airplanes to right now our big project is we need a battery servicing room. So we put our construction hats on, and the airplanes, I don't think we have had to do much on them for the last couple months or so. But yeah, it's Africa. There's always something to be keeping busy with, whether that is the construction of building a new room at the hangar, or dealing with some minor snags on the aircraft, like the push-to-talk switch isn't functioning all the time, or the 12-volt socket blew a fuse. And so there's always little things like that are keeping us busy as well.
So you've worked on aircraft in Canada, you've worked on aircraft in Angola. What's the difference? I imagine maintaining a fleet of aircraft in Angola has unique challenges, just with the availability of parts and so forth.
Absolutely. And I was glad when we got here, seeing the parts room. We're actually pretty well stocked. One place I worked at before coming here and telling people that, yeah, I'm going to move, looks like to Africa, I'm going to go fix airplanes there, they would laugh at me because the complaint in that particular company was that we didn't have resources to do proper work on the airplane. And they say, you're going to move to Africa and it's going to be even worse. And I can honestly say, coming here, that because it's not a for-profit mindset here, we can focus on safety. And if we miss some flights because it's just not safe, it's not the end of the world. what helps the program run is not the revenue from those flights. It's from individuals who see what's going on here and want to be a part of it. But yeah, definitely parts is our biggest issue. Definitely got to give a lot of lead time in order to get stuff here. And the other one example I always use, the other sort of pet peeve I have here is when you just need something simple. I needed a 5-gallon bucket, and I just could not find a store that sold a 5-gallon bucket. I'm used to, in Canada, we have a big box store called Canadian Tire, and it's kind of like a Lowe's or a Home Depot. And if we had one of those stores here, oh my goodness, I feel like we'd be so much more productive, because you spend half your day sometimes just driving around the city looking for a simple thing like a bucket.
Yeah, so if you need a 5-gallon bucket or a certain bit for your drill, it may take you a month to find it.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Otherwise, it just goes on the list for Namibia, which is the country to the south. Is quite often we take our vacations there, and it just turns into a shopping trip.
So what would you say is the most exciting part about working in missionary aviation there?
Sometimes exciting in a good way, sometimes in a bad way. Is just you really don't know what to expect one day to the next. When we first got involved with MAF, that was one of our questions, is what is a typical day? And the answer to our frustration was, for as many different programs as we run is however many answers we have. And so I think like a typical day for me is Monday to Friday, I'm at the hangar, and whether that's, doing regular stuff like emails or working on the airplanes or just improving the maintenance department is something that we just do here. But it's definitely the exciting in a good way part is when you see these passengers that we fly in and out from the clinics with smiles on their faces, and being restored, whether that's in a physical way or in a spiritual way. It's really cool to see. And on a different level, Angola is a beautiful country with incredible scenery. So it's pretty cool to be able to go for a Sunday drive, and there's views that I would, not that I've seen it, I to make a comparison would be there's scenes that look like the Grand Canyon. There's not a whole lot of tourism in the country of Angola, but there's a large group of us where we like to go camping. So we drive 4 hours to the beach a couple times a year. And because there's no tourism and there's tons of beaches, you just drive right on that beach and you pitch your tent, and for the most part, you don't see anyone. And so it's nice to kind of get away from the hustle of Angola and go spearfishing for a couple days sometimes.
What would you say is the most difficult part of your work there?
Culture is a very broad answer, I guess. And for myself, narrowing that down to just language, just having to deal with, there's lots of police, and when they pull you over randomly and you need to talk to them, for the first few months we were here was kind of nerve-wracking, especially when the words you do pick up are, I need to keep your truck overnight, and this happens to be at a police stop where you're still 2 hours away from home. So I think that got my stress level up a little bit, was just any long drive anywhere and having to deal with police, because inevitably you were going to have to talk to them at some point. Yeah, and I think a surprising one for me here was just the adjustment to a new church. And it's we love our church here, and it's been good, but it's also been difficult at times where, because it's in a different language, you don't understand everything all the time. And we came from a church where we were quite involved with our youth ministries and young adults, and to come here and there isn't much of that. There's no nursery. With our 2-year-old son, it's difficult that you got to hold on to him during the service every week, and that's along with the other 15 babies that are in the small room. To get through that has been a bit of a challenge, I would say, for sure.
Think of a few stories, instances, occurrences that are good memories and things that when you're long gone from Angola one day will stand out to you as, hey, we made a difference that day in this way with this person.
I think that satisfaction will come out of partially just being able to say that, like, we did it. We this was something that we never thought we would end up doing. And a lot of that has to do with just looking back on everything that it took to get here and go, wow, God has been faithful. Just the relationships that have been built, and that's definitely one of the big things we found about Africa is the relationships are everything. So it's challenged us greatly to focus more on that. It's not just about what you do, and that's not your identification and who you are. It's the people around you that truly are what make the difference.
I so appreciate you sharing about the work that you're doing there and the story of how you got there and so forth. I would like to ask you, have you had any spiritual struggles since you've been there?
Wrestling with church has definitely been a big one, and finding out that it's not the same thing as it was as our church back home, when the sermons kind of revolve around why it's wrong to have 3 wives. Sometimes it feels like it doesn't apply to you. So, but trying to push through that and see that, church is more than a Sunday morning sermon, that it's about relationships there as well, and the body of believers, and trying to plug into that has been a great challenge for myself, for sure.
So tell me about how have your family and your friends and maybe even your church family back home, how have they been helpful and encouraging to you?
Oh, incredibly. It's definitely made it easier that both my family and my wife's family are on board with this. It's not like they're questioning, why did you move halfway around the world when, you could have a much better job, but much better paying job in North America. So that encouragement has been good. Our church, most of our supporters are individuals at our home church, which is great. And in fact, 2 of our friends were able to come out here and visit us just last month. And to be able to show them around, to see what the daily grind looks like here, and now being able to talk with them and not having to give a whole backstory on a situation, and to just be able to say, yeah, this was difficult, makes a big difference.
Tell me about your home church. You said most of your supporters came from there. Do you still maintain close contact with that church?
We do, yes. Probably not as much as we would like to, but yeah, it's difficult to get fully involved with life here and try and keep a life going back home. That's been a great difficulty as well, but they've been very understanding, all the folks at West London Alliance Church. Yeah, sometimes I think when we probably aren't as regular in our communication, there's been several of them who are able to email us or Skype with us, and it's good to catch up that way. And I think we do quarterly newsletters as well, so that way all our supporters do get some sort of update from us.
That's one way that you keep your supporters, your friends, your family updated with what's going on in your life is through the newsletters that you send out through MAF. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, we have a blog as well. Facebook is easy to do. My wife does a good job of making sure that all our supporters are kept updated.
Technology really does make it easy to update. It's a completely different world than what it was for people 50 years ago on the mission field.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, to have internet changes everything.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that we're able to have this conversation and record it and so forth with me sitting in Huntsville, Alabama, and you sitting in Angola is quite amazing, and it's a tool for the church when it's used in the right way.
Yeah, no doubt.
So I'm curious, is there someone who's been a mentor to you along the way, whether it's someone with MAF, maybe who's done the sort of work that you're doing, or just someone else that you know?
I wouldn't say that there's one person who really sticks out along the way. I think at different stages of life, there was someone who was kind of there primarily. Moving over here, that kind of shakes things up a bit just because of infrequent contact. But my good close friend Josh, we keep regular contact with each other. He's pretty good at calling me on a near weekly basis and just see how I'm doing. One of the pastors at our church, I keep regular contact with him, and he's pretty good at hearing me out on just what's bothering Marcel and not overloading me with information. So, Graham, if you're listening, I thank you. Yeah, and I think within MAF, we just had a visit from our member care department, which is a husband and wife team, Gary and Doreen Taves, who they first got involved with overseas mission aviation 35 years ago and have been based in like 13 different countries. So if anyone has seen it and been there, then they've been a good ear or a good voice to us as well.
If you could go back in time and give your younger pre-mission field self some advice, what would it be?
Ooh, I think it'd be don't worry. There's so much in life here that right now can weigh me down. It's probably a lot of just my personality that induces it, where I feel like I've got to stay busy doing something because everyone else seems like they're busy, and just to don't worry about how things will work out as much as you do. When you've got as little control over situations, like way less than you think you do, then to worry about it is to tell God that you don't think he's big enough to deal with it. So yeah, that'd probably be the one thing I'd tell myself earlier.
I imagine that there's many folks out there that would be good advice for, not just folks headed to the mission field, but for all of us, including a guy on the other end of the line from you right now. Let me ask you this. Is there a book that you would recommend, something that helped you in your path to where you are now, or just in your Christian walk in general? Is there something you would recommend to the audience?
Yeah, there was a couple that impacted me at a couple stages. When I was first, I think I was fresh out of school at this point, I read Jim Elliot's biography, and that impacted me in a way. I think that was one of those times where MAF popped up at a random spot where I found out that they had flown him along with the other men in Ecuador. And just hearing about his passion for the gospel and just furthering the kingdom, that to the point where life didn't even matter, was a big challenge to me. And another one we did was John Piper's Desiring God with our small group from church, which also really spoke into my life as far as what's important.
Both of those are outstanding books. Good suggestions there. Could you tell us a few ways that we could be praying for you and for your wife and your son and the work that's going on there?
One of the studies that we're doing as a complete missions group with different organizations here, we meet bi-weekly, and right now we're doing a study just on Sabbath rest, which we're pretty early into it, but I think it's something that is so big for what so many people here need to hear, because it's so easy to see the need and think that you just need to work harder, but to realize that rest is important and it's a gift from God, and if you don't take it, you're really hurting yourself in the long run. So yeah, prayer for that would be much appreciated. And for the unity of the whole team here right now, it's incredibly awesome just to be part of the whole team, and I think is a big part of why so many different individuals are able to stay here as long as they do.
I appreciate you sharing those things, and I will certainly be praying for you in those areas, and I know that the folks listening will as well. So how can people connect with you, Marcel, on social media, or I think you mentioned a blog, to learn more about you and your family, and maybe even become a supporter of you in your ministry there in Angola?
We have a page that we regularly update on Facebook. Marcel and Kelly Serving with MAF is one way you can find that. And I think anytime we do a blog, we update it on there as well, which If you don't have Facebook, it's marcelandkelly.blogspot.com. One other way you can connect with us as MAF in Angola is simply mafangola.com. On Twitter or Instagram, you can see what the program is up to at MAF Angola. And personally, I have a couple of those accounts as well at mboorsy, if you think I'm that interesting of a person.
Well, I think you're interesting, so we'll definitely share those. We'll have show notes that go along with this podcast, and I'll include some of those links in the show notes, so folks who want to connect with you will have the way to.
Sounds great.
Well, Marcel, I do want to thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate your open conversation about the things that we've asked you about, and the informative things that you have told us about the sort of work that you're doing there, and about how you got there in the first place. One of my purposes for this show is so that young men and women who are feeling called to missions work in general, or maybe particularly to missionary aviation, can hear stories from individuals like you and get some guidance in their own walk toward the mission field. So I do appreciate you sharing today.
Oh, my pleasure. Happy to be here.
And I hope that you and I can stay in touch and talk to one another again really soon, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed hearing from Marcel as much as I did. I think it was good for us to hear from someone who is serving in missionary aviation in a role other than a pilot. He certainly brought a slightly different perspective to the show this time. If you are enjoying these episodes, please take a few minutes and share them with your friends and family on social media. Also, I'd really appreciate you heading over to iTunes and leaving us a review there. You can do so by going to plainfaith.com/review. Again, that's plainfaith.com/review. And if you'd like to be a part of bringing these episodes to others, please consider becoming a patron by visiting patreon.com/plainfaith. Patreon.com/plainfaith. I have a few different reward levels set up, some that include giveaways like Plain Faith stickers and flight suit patches, and even Plain Faith t-shirts. You can become a patron for as little as $1 an episode, and your support will help me do some cool things with the show that I have in mind. I look forward to being back with you again in a couple of weeks. Until then, may God bless you and your families.
Well, that's it for this episode. We thank you once again for listening. You can learn more about the podcast and subscribe to it by visiting plainfaith.com. That's PLANE faith.com. You will also find links there to connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you are interested in becoming a patron of the show, you can do that as well by visiting patreon.com/plainfaith. And of course, Jimmy would love to hear from you personally, so feel free to email him at jimmy@plainfaith.com or by using the contact form on our website. Until next time, remember that God made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God.
The intro and outro music for the Plain Faith podcast is a song called Chipper by Kevin MacLeod. You can find his work at incompetech.com.